Today we're going to be looking at something quite important, and I have an expert on the conversation, and every time he's on the program he keeps talking about it, and that's the issue of supply chain. Our guest always says that supply chain is one of Nigeria's biggest problem, and if we could somehow sort that issue out, maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to do better. Really as an economy. But now even the supply chain in itself has certain bottlenecks, and we're looking at the trilemma of Nigeria's supply chain. This is energy, transport, and security. Now, reliable and affordable energy is the backbone of any modern supply chain. In Nigeria, however, persistent power shortages, high fuel cost, and an overdependence on diesel generators drive up logistics expenses. Now, the entry of the private refinery and smaller modular refineries promises some sort of relief. But the question remains, can these developments translate into lower energy costs across the supply chain? Over to transportation and infrastructure. Equally important is transport. From congested seaports in Lagos to bad road networks and underdeveloped rail systems, Nigeria's transport inefficiencies have turned logistics into one of the most expensive in Africa. While efforts are underway to improve rail connections, inland dry ports and the road rehabilitation bottlenecks remain a major stumbling block to seamless trade flows. Now to security, and this is an issue that affects not just supply chain, but even our food. Then comes security. Insecurity in farming regions hampers food supply, while banditry, oil theft, and pipeline vandalism disrupt both domestic and export chains. Transporting goods safely across regions is no longer just a cost issue, but a security challenge that directly affects inflation, food availability, and investor confidence. Can we overcome this trilemma? And if we can, what does that mean and how will it impact our economy? Joining me via phone call this morning is Aliyu Ilias, an economist, development and supply chain expert. Good morning, Dr. Ilias, for joining on the program this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, this is your, well, I call it your forte, or a place somewhere that you speak about a lot. These issues, energy, transport, and security, as as the topic says, the trilemma of the supply chain. Can you tell us basically from your end what you think about it?
Right. Basically, when we talk about supply chain, every activity that has to do with goods and services must pass through supply chain. And in passing through supply chain, it simply means there should be an infrastructure and a policy framework that will support such a supply chain. So with those infrastructure and policy framework, things will seem to be seamless and things will stand to be flourish. The industrial sector of the economy will work well. The agricultural sector of the economy will work well. The oil and gas will also work well. So those are the things we must put in place if we want Nigeria to actually do better. And I must also bring this to your knowledge, that if you want things to become much more less costly, you must also work on the framework and the supply chain. For instance, we are complaining about the delivery of food, and the major problem there is the food supply chain. Talk about delivery of oil and gas in terms of what Dangote is trying to do. Dangote is now in midstream because we want to bridge the supply chain gap in oil and gas. It also has to do with other products or manufacturing products. So if the supply chain is very, very flourished to get things, I can also take to global community. If you look at Russia-Ukraine war, how does what does it actually affect all of us globally, especially Africa? Take this large chunk of share of it. The negative impact, as it were, is because there is a challenge because of the war. They have supply chain problem of grain, wheat, and other consumables. So these are the things we must also start looking at. So for us to move from where we are, for us to develop, for us to meet up the developing nations, we must work on our supply chain framework.
Okay. Now, could you give us like a breakdown of, how energy, transport, and security, maybe someone is wondering, how does this really impact supply chain? Could you help us break it down? How does energy, affect supply chain? How does this our lack of constant energy affect supply chain? How does the bad road networks, how, only one seemingly viable form of mode of transportation affect supply chain, and of course the security issue? Could you break that down for us?
Right. So when we talk about energy, let's look at it from two perspectives. Let's look at our energy supply chain from electricity and also now if you look at our problem of electricity, every day they say there's a grid collapse. Every day they say there's a grid collapse. What brings about this collapse is because of obsolete infrastructure. Now, the supply chain electricity, it was also passed through a process. In this case, it's also still transportation, but transportation through those cables. If there's any breach, it's going to definitely disrupt the supply of electricity. And that's why we are telling federal government that you have privatized the gencos, those that generate electricity. You have privatized the distribution part of the electricity. The one that has to do with supply and supply chain itself is the transmission. Why you also privatize it? So that we can actually have people that are competent to handle it. That's for energy. So let's go for oil and gas. I'm sure your listeners, you've got to hear that Dangote supply America. It's because the moving it from Nigeria to there appears seamless. That is it. You can also see that what is making us buying fuel at a higher cost is supply chain problem. You will recall that we have what we call a petroleum equalization fund. That agency was then put on the scrap now to really bridge the gap between people that are supplying to our far place and that are supplying to other parts of Nigeria. So now the major problem, you can see that we have issue of Pengasan, issue of Nuken, is because they are in the midstream, and the midstream focus much more on the supply chain process. So until we make it seamless, through what? Through good road. Good road is very, very key. Unless bureaucratic bottleneck, even less union road, that will also affect supply. You could see that Dangote have resolved to supply. I must also bring this to your notice. So to supply a truck of PMS, it costs about 49 million naira on average. And Dangote is telling people, owners of maybe filling stations, that do not worry, I am going to be taking that responsibility to supply last mile delivery to you. That's payment. What is Dangote trying to do? He's trying to kill all the bureaucratic bottlenecks that affect supply of PMS, and that is a good direction if it can actually sustain it, and it will not transfer that into the cost of fuel at the pump price. So by and large, if you can look at that area, we have about 30,000 trucks on the road. With Dangote 4,000 coming, that's about 34. So if we can make it seamless, we can fix our road infrastructure very well. We can reduce the security agencies collecting money at maybe every kilometer in some area. If we can use that, that will help us to actually have it seamless. It will reduce the price. The delivery time, let's say the delivery time will also be very, very, very low. So the optimistic time will be high, while the pessimistic time is very, very low. And we can actually calculate when to move an item and when it should be delivered.
Okay. Now, let's go to the energy part of this conversation. Now, can decentralized energy, and I'm talking about renewables, gas to power, embedded generation, reduce logistics costs?
Right. 100%. You recall that we have different way of generating electricity. We have hydro and we have gas. So it depends on who and what you actually want to use. But I tell you, renewable energy make less pressure on our grid. So if we can have a renewable energy alternative from what we are having now, it should be a plus. Not like we will have, we're begin to have alternatives to also PMS now. PMS to gas. So I think that will help. So there's also a way that, in fact, let me tell you, in South Africa and other places, once you are able to go off grid and you are generating your own renewable energy, country will still come and be giving you token every year, appreciating you for reducing pressure on the electricity that is being sent through the transmission.
Okay. Now, let's go to transport. You know, we've talked about it earlier in my introduction. I said with the most mode of transportation in Nigeria is really the roads. Now, I know that prior to now, we used to have the pipelines delivering oils from certain parts of the country to certain parts of the country and the refineries. And all those issues of vandalism have come to bear. Now, what do you think if we, you know, how would we better make the transportation, you know, work for our inland waterways and our railway? If we're able to get these things running well, how well would it impact, you know, the supply chain problem and the economy in Nigeria?
Right. I think, you know, a country like Nigeria should optimize what we call multimodal transportation. That is, we maximize every available means of transportation: water, road, pipeline, rail, air. And I can tell you, they have not maximized any of them to a point of even 70%. Even transport that seems that we have maximized. So let me give you a good example. If you look at Lagos State now have what we call a red line, blue line. They are coming up with their orange line and purple line very soon. Now, the people that really commute in a day is not less than 2 million people in a day. So you look at how that has actually impacted, make life much more easy. There's some routes that they will pass. Remember, even with that, they don't experience go slow. They don't experience the road network problem and what have you. It makes life much more easier. So for us to actually do more, we must have. I can also tell you in FCT, we have a metro rail that passes through central area to Karamajiji axis to the airport, to Dede, to Kubwa.
Okay.
So if you look at that, that has made life easy for people in Abuja. So that's for rail. If you also look at the transportation has been a major problem because of the cost of PMS, and that makes it much more expensive. So if we can have our gas working better, and we can actually reduce the cost of transportation, that will happen. Then we also must do without these small cars. If you look at Abuja, for instance, the small cars that are working. If you have long bus, they can contain about 100 people at a go. It will also ease our transportation. So that's for that. Let's also look at inland waterway. Look at the casualty we are suffering in our inland waterway, especially, you know, people without life jacket, people losing their life. It's the transport supply chain. So we must look at that area very well. I'm sure that things began to be much more easy for people. Not only also the policy framework that will guide people very well. If you also look at our air transportation, I can tell you we have shortage of it. If you go to the airport now, it is very full. People, everybody is looking for the one, and it is not enough. And you don't go to a lot of routes. The routes they go is usually Abuja, Lagos, you know, maybe Port Harcourt, Kano. Other ones are some days. So you have to look for the day you are going to go into that, going for that. So that's the problem you actually face. So transport supply chain, if you can do more. But I talked about pipeline as well. You know, pipeline is the transport system too. They have what is called AKK, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano, gas. You know, they have been on it for a long time, and that is giving us a serious issue. By now, we have access to gas in Kano, you know, with ease. I can also take you back to the issue of the dredging. During President Omar Musa Adua, he was able to start the dredging of River Niger so that light ships can come down to local, to Benue, to Kogi, and some part of the Niger state. But immediately President Jonathan came in, I don't know, he just ignored that policy. The sand has come back to there and it's actually affecting our supply chain. So these are the problems we actually face. So to solve that transport problem, food items, transport system, and cost of commodity will not experience a drastic reduction.
All right. So you mentioned Lagos and equally mentioned the ports. So let's look at this. How critical is the Lagos port reform and inland dry ports in decongesting supply bottlenecks? Now, this for, I'm sure, importation.
Right. So I think there's an improvement in that area, but I will not be satisfied. One thing is being done. Before I even analyze the improvement they have actually made, before I will do that, let me talk about why is it that it's only Lagos? Lagos ports that is actually working well. We have Calabar, we have Onne. We are able to also make sure that we channel some ship through the Onne, through Calabar seaport, so that Lagos can be congested. In terms of transport trouble, in terms of road network and what have you. So I think we should start from canvassing that Nigerians should open up those areas too, so that we can have some ships. If I thought it's rural and other ships to actually pass through that area too. Then, in terms of the congestion, I must tell you it has been decongested to a high level. So we pray they will do more because you can get to. Imagine you get to the seaport and you are using about 6 hours to get yourself out of the seaport. 6 hours that would have taken you from Nigeria to London. So these are the things we must start looking at. So and there too, we pray that their NSW, National Single Window, will have come to solve a lot of problems. Because now you have to do with what we call port health, which is the environmental health workers. You have to deal with SON, you have to deal with NAFDAC, you have to deal with custom. On the road, you have to deal with some union and police agents. Even if you can come and they have a one-stop shop that wants to get one documentation, you can the way IDEC actually works, they can actually move on. That would have been a good one. So we must find a way to decongest that area and also make sure we have a single window of our processes.
All right. Now, what policy mix can address oil theft and pipeline vandalism, which disrupt both exports and local supply?
Right. This government has tried in terms of pipeline vandalism, maybe because they give it to Antita. Antita is a Polo company. It's actually oversees the security of pipeline vandalism. I think we have seen it coming down, and Nigeria have experienced more exploration in that aspect. So I think they should do it more because the major thing is that we must find solutions to lasting solutions so that we can move ahead in a positive manner. However, I think we must go with technology more because use technology, you will not be able to even see where the pipeline vandalism is actually happening. So I think with that we can also do it. Like we have a supply chain of Dangote using buses. Using trucks. If we have a safe waterway and safe road, it can also pass all this commodity through pipeline. There's nothing stopping from laying pipeline from Lagos to Abuja. But the problem is that it is secure and it's not going to be vandalized, and that's why he went and bought a truck. And truck had issues because it's going to also deepen our problem of road infrastructure. Okay, now let's go to technology. How could we solve this problem using technology-driven monitoring, like say drones, digital tracking? How can it improve cargo safety and, of course, reduce losses? Well, the fact is that we are using technology now. Because without technology, you cannot even do the 21st century supply chain needs technology. But what type of technology are we actually using? Is the technology? Let me give you a good example. Imagine our rail having issue, people derailing, and somebody went and vandalized. And no technology is telling you, is alerting you that no, this road has got to have issues. So we must deploy the necessary technology that is globally proved that will help us to actually do more in terms of our supply chain.
How can Nigeria now align its supply chain reforms with the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement to become a regional hub? I know that this is a conversation we keep having, and supposedly the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement is supposed to help, make things easier for the African continent. But how can we hone into it and align our supply chain to it and make ourselves a regional hub?
Right. You see, TFA, African Free Trade, Free Continental Trade Area, I think it's one of the things that we must uphold very well, and we must have a rail that will cut across the whole Africa. If you look at Europe, within Europe, you can use trade to move everywhere there, and it is the supply chain. So because of that, you can move items from one place to the other. But if you want to cross ordinary Togo, Benin Republic, or Chad, you have to go with trucks. But ordinarily, you're supposed to have a trade that actually moves. So I think that without that, we cannot have a seamless trade in Africa. I listen to most of the things that happen at UNGA, on 80th UNGA, and I see that most of our African ambassadors for trade. The global community will not come and solve your problem. You're supposed to start it very well and make sure that trade is actually flowing. How many states, how many countries have actually taken to that free trade? So until we come and do that ourselves, fix our rail, that country rail that will cross people, I think President Buhari tried to do is it charge in Nigeria, the one that has to do with Maradi and what have you. So these are the things that actually solve our problems. So I think we need to look into that critically.
So another thing is, away from the government, there's the private sector. And of course, the government's job is to make policies that would enable the private sector thrive, in which turn will create employment and will help the economy to be vibrant and thrive. Now, how can private partnerships come into place to see that this logistics infrastructure is, solved and it's better working to make the Nigerian economy work too as well?
Right. To actually achieve that, it's very, very simple. We have to go back to government. Government must create a policy framework that will attract private people to come and invest. In Nigeria, for example, we have what we call a policy sum and sort. One government will come and do one policy, the other government will come and say, no, we don't want to do that policy. These are the major problems we keep having. So until government make it much more attractive for private sector, we cannot experience a good investment in that area. And government must we have Lagos, let's say we have Lagos about the rail now. You can tell private sector to take their cabin. Because his capital is intensive, but you must have laid, then they will come and get their own cabin on it. Like Dangote, I remember earlier, he was ready to actually buy some cabin so that I can move an item, but we are slow in the implementation of creation of the rail road itself. These are the problems that we're actually experiencing.
Okay, what impact the subsidies play in making, or rather, what's the balance needed between subsidies, tariffs, incentives to make supply chains more effective and efficient?
Well, yes, most people that are professional, you must actually make an incentive for them to actually keep growth. And in creating an incentive, you must ensure that you create a necessary incentive that will make things actually so, for instance, if you tell them that if you invest in this store, for the next 5 years, you will not pay tax. For the next 5 years, then location to actually use. So these are the things you must make sure that we make it easy for them so that they can actually come. There must be direct subsidy. It simplifies that processes. I can find it easy to achieve.
All right, now, will digitization, blockchain, e-logistics platforms redefine transparency and cost savings in Nigeria's supply chain? Doctor? We'll go on a short break, and when we return, the conversation continues. Please do stay with us. Welcome back to Business Daily. Welcome back from that short break. Now, Dr. Ilias, before we lost you, I was asking about digitalization, things like blockchain, e-logistics platforms. How would they redefine transparency and cost savings in Nigeria's supply chain? Doctor?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you repeat that?
I said, how can things like blockchain, logistics platform, how can they redefine transparency and cost savings in Nigeria's supply chain?
So you are talking about blockchain technology, if I get you right?
Yes, and e-logistics platforms as well. Just basically going to digital, basically.
Right. So, you know, the beauty of digitalization is that it makes a lot of things much more easier, and by so doing, it makes something that you have achieved in a month, you can bring it down to a week for you, even 2 days. So that simply means that you go online to achieve, just like the way we go to bank. You know, before technology itself, we will go to bank and queue. And if I recall, that time you have to even submit, you have to look for a voucher and whatever. But now with technology, it has become much more easier. So I think that's what the blockchain, technology can actually, e-technology can actually do. That's the meaning of fintech. Fintech has come to actually make things much more easier. And that's what it's all about.
Now, how can we build a global, because we're in a global market, we're not just an entity on our own, solitude and all that. No, we're dealing with other people. So how can us as a country, Nigeria, build a resilience against the global shocks now, such as fuel price hikes and shipping disruptions? If you remember, I think sometime last year, the Suez Canal was blocked due to some certain issues, and a lot of issues happened. A lot of imports and exports were on pause and on lockdown due to that. So how can we build resilience against things like this when they come up?
Right. For us to have what I call shock absorber against the global supply chain problem, it's for us to have sufficiency. As a Nigerian country, we are supposed to have our own silos. And our silos are supposed to have enough foods that will take us, just like what we say about foreign reserves. We have $0.3 billion now, and they said it can be enough for us for export for the next 8 months. That means the economic shock cannot affect us in that period. So if you have the silos that have a lot of food, you wouldn't have issues, because it's just for you to open it up when there's trouble, and that's what it has come to solve. So the same thing we can actually apply to all that area. We should have enough, we should be self-sufficient, and we should also have reservoir for everything. Just like we have Dangote and his PMS now, I'm not sure we can say we will likely have a queue looking for fuel in the filling station, because Dangote is sufficiently providing that for us, and he has capacity that can actually provide for us every day. So these are the things they're actually looking at.
All right, and to our last question now, what are the reforms that we should, or you expect the government to put in place or come up with in the next 12 to 24 months to impact and affect this trilemma of supply chain, that is energy, transport, and security in Nigeria?
Right. So let me take it this way. I will take it sectorially. Let's look at INEC. The major work they are doing in INEC is supply chain because they move their ballot papers on the day of the election. So they must always look for a professional to be involved, a supply chain professional to be involved in all sector. So that it can actually not be looking at the election proper, but looking at the logistics, transportation, movement of items. That's one. Then in terms of a food supply chain, government needs to create a kind of unit in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture or livestock to make sure that they have a supply chain department that will be looking at ease of moving items from one place to the other. Maybe it's construction of feeder roads and other things that should make it work. Then in terms of the oil and gas sector, I think we have moved that one very well. The only thing that is in that area that they should not allow monopoly. Monopoly will have make us pay through our nose. But if we have other competitors, that would have, because part of the principle of supply chain is to also have competition in that area so that we can actually get to compare prices. So in terms of global shock, let us go and have our own reservoir. America is using cracking to generate their fuel, and I can tell you they have fuel that can take them for the next 10 years under the water. So we must also look at that area to create a lot of the more you have reservoir, the more you affect the price. That's why we said basic demand and supply in economists. Once there is adequate supply to reduce price, when demand is more, price will be very, very high. Those are the basic principles. So in a nutshell, the government needs to have people that have basic knowledge of supply chain.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Aliyu Ilias, for joining us on the program this morning, sharing your insights on the supply chain situation in Nigeria. All right, that's the much we have for you today on the program. I'm sure you've heard what Dr. Ilias said as the supply chain expert. A lot needs to be done to see to it that we are able to get these things done. Supply chain impacts a lot of things that we do in the country. He even mentioned the INEC paper, and for a moment I didn't even consider that could be an option, but you could see there, how do you move these things from here for elections? So supply chain is very important, even to the lowest person doing business, into the SMEs, very important as well. So energy, transportation, security, these trilemmas, something needs to be done to be able to have an impact, in which turn will now impact the Nigerian economy and, of course, make us thrive and live better lives. That's so much for you on the program this morning. I've been your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Thank you for staying with us for more of our news, programs, and documentaries. Do well, follow us on our social media platforms and YouTube live stream. Same time, same place next week. Bye for now.